So I've heard a number of things online and from people who have seen things or heard things online about the auroras. It is not a conspiracy theory to suggest that the Earth's magnetic field is weakening or that the poles are wandering. There is empirical data and peer-reviewed studies that point that direction. A weakened magnetic field would account for relatively run-of-the-mill, not even the biggest solar max on record, flares to cause aurora to be seen over mid-latitudes. In fact, this has happened now on 7 different occasions because there were 2 nights in a row here this weekend. But even if you just want to go with solar storms or whatever, it's like 6 total storms have caused these in the last year. What is a conspiracy theory is that the auroras were fake or that there was some shit put in the atmosphere to make it more so. The amount of energy required to light that atmosphere up like that is beyond our capacity. I don't even think that any secret government technology that they're keeping in the black box and the black budget and underneath the mountains or whatever, I don't even think that's capable of that. You don't understand the sun. I don't understand the sun. That shit's confusing as hell to me. I'm not saying I'm baffled and mystified. There's lots of it that is sensible from what we theorize. But some of the patterns and behavior that it does, let me just say that I've taken personality tests in the course of understanding my mental health and what, disorders and such are going on. Know thyself is step number 1 in enlightenment. I tested for an off-the-charts ability to wrap my head around things. And some of the shit the sun does, I just can't wrap my head around. And it's not in an illogical fashion. It's that system is so big and so complex that to model it is basically impossible. The model would ignite, so I have not done a deep dive. I'm not going to do a deep dive. I'm not going to provide sources. I'm not going to tell you even to look it up. I'm just going to reiterate the things that I've been saying. Everything about our culture is a lie. And the culture's purpose is to govern society's behavior. Government itself, the state, has become part of the culture in our self-determining democracy, republic type thing. I don't think it matters which came first in the corruption of which. Did culture corrupt government? Did government corrupt culture? Certainly both are now corrupt, and that is what matters. In the interests of self-preservation and retaining power, the government works with media and social media and any other interactive cultural platforms or whatever. Not just in the sense of online platforms, but in a more general sense of like the news, newspapers, radio, advertising, so that in between things, toy lines, the concepts of what the stories are of the shows that the kids watch that then say, hey, mom, buy me the toy or the shirt or the trinket or the doodad or the model or whatever it is, because it's beyond action figures now. But it is exactly the same thing. Everything is meant to sell something else. But in between that are examples for impressionable minds, things that as people normalize them and become desensitized to them, they accept them. This is how the culture changes the behavior of the society. So if the culture is rife with heroism, people are more apt to save other people and help other people. If generosity was culturally promoted on a widespread basis, within time, it would simply become acceptable to be generous with each other. What is actually being done, though, is that the culture leads the society into a general state of kind of, I don't want to say good behavior, but well-behavedness, while simultaneously presenting an utterly fictitious version of reality. And people think that it's real. Not that they think that the fiction they watch is real necessarily, but they think that certain things within that fiction are within the realm of possibility. And with no regard whatsoever to any bias or judgment or anything. Let me take that back. The casual asides and things that are said in TV shows, ways that people behave that just, if you watch enough procedural cop shows, you may just think it natural that cops are friendly and helpful and always there for your benefit, never trying to get you on anything that you may or may not actually be doing, or coming down on you for something they don't have to just because they feel like it. And if they do, they are the bad guy. And I'm not saying that that may not be the case a lot of the time, but for personal safety reasons, to avoid accidentally stepping into the trap of some tyrant, you just kind of have to be a certain way all the time. But in the shows, the fiction, it's different. Cannot comment on real-world events that fully fit the exact same description as far as how the culture influenced the behavior of society at around the turn of the century. So a culture which also fosters the idea of how much more someone somewhere has got secretly in the knowledge department, knowledge being power, mind you, that any wild shit that happens in reality could potentially be chalked up to similar such things. Now, I saw one mention of kind of a refutation of the idea that HAARP, the High Altitude Auroral Research Project, was used again, the amount of energy needed is not present there. There may be other facilities, and if other facilities worked in tandem, something could be done, but The two things that I'm aware of, well, three things technically, that such devices are really capable of would be the stated design objective, which is to ionize the upper atmosphere in a focused way that causes it to raise up and potentially, I believe, cause an aurora or whatever that they attempt to study it. The result, however, also being that when enough of the atmosphere is heated to where it raises up, when the energy is removed from the equation by turning off the device, that this air tends to kind of compress back down toward the ground. And this is, I can't remember whose law it is. And I'm a nincompoop for not remembering this name. I know this is a name I should know. It's not Newton. Anyways, the idea that the gas is not going to, like air and atmosphere and everything, is not going to stay bunched in one way. When it's against gravity and the rest of the system's equilibrium, it will even out. It will expand to fill the gap, which means a downward rush, change in air pressure, purportedly able to stimulate weather patterns. That is the second, as a side effect of the original design. Oh, I'm sorry, it's a total of 4, because there is a second alternate use, which is to focus the beam toward a reflector on a satellite, which then redirects it to another location. And at that location, you can sound for petroleum by vibrating the frequency that would cause the bedrock underneath of it to vibrate. And it's measurable through seismographs, and the particulars of the vibration identify what's below. So you can find hidden oil reserves, natural gas, whatever. So I'm just not stating the fourth one because that would get labeled a conspiracy theory, you see. And on YouTube, we're not supposed to promote conspiracy theories. So factually speaking, the magnetic poles are wandering at this time. Field strength has been measured over time. The rate of the drop is calculable. There is an apparent date, unless something different happens. Not a specific date of the date, but roundabouts a decade. And as this exponential increase along a curve of weakening of the magnetic field occurs, the aurora get worse and worse. And by worse, I mean more prevalent, lower to the ground. If they get to the point where they're coming out of the ground or just above it, I think you would get the cloud to ground, or earth to, what is it? The L shell magnetic field, the innermost field lines from between. It would seem as if lightning is coming and going from space. And this would not be passive, invisible, ghost lightning all around you. The amount of energy involved in that would mean that it would be hazardous. That's just a possibility. Certainly, the failure of the power grid, cellular systems, etc. And as long as the magnetic field is in that state, such things would basically be impossible because of the interference, because of basically not having any defense against all of that ionizing radiation. Also, as a consequence, a lot of cancer. Sometimes I don't think it'll matter what side of the planet you're on, whether it's a flare or not. It'll just be all of it coming in all at once. Now, where the culture and the government being intertwined comes into play in this, because I'm not rambling, I'm just getting things laid out. Where they come into this is attempts to mess with people, to try and get people of a certain persuasion to go along with something that basically locks them into a particular way of thought, completely independent from what is being done to the masses. Perhaps in an effort to ensnare such minds and keep them away from waking other people up or something. But it's been a very misguided bunch of attempts. Somebody doesn't really understand what they're doing, or maybe someone does and they're doing it wrong to protect everyone, or I don't know. But what it involves is covert promotion of things like flat Earth. Things like aliens secretly running things behind the scenes. The Blue Book. All bullshit. In, I believe, the 1970s, the counterintelligence propaganda operations of the FBI and CIA, maybe it was just the CIA, were exposed over a number of years in Congress. And what was admitted to under oath was a number of different ways that the government was attempting to manipulate the perceptions and opinions of the population to, in other words, make us think what they wanted us to think and keep us under control. Counterintelligence propaganda is abbreviated as COINTELPRO. So if I say COINTELPRO, that is what I am referring to. Now there is another type of that, which was also admitted to in these same hearings, that is a type of controlled resistance. Keeping people who might otherwise get rowdy under control. Directing where they go, what they do, what they think, what they say. You can see this now in people who are uninvolved's blind support for whatever the current cause is that people are having mostly peaceful protests about on a very regular basis, or people who are of the belief that this one guy running for president is the end-all be-all solution. Bullshit conspiracy theories get thrown out by people who work for the government or are paid by people who work for the government. This is a thing that they've admitted to over and over again. It's not a conspiracy theory. The sun doing its thing is a cycle that has marks that it leaves on the earth every so often in ways that we are able to detect scientifically. And we are coming up on one of them. Not exactly sure what that means, what all it entails, just a few things here and there that a bunch of things have in common over time very regularly. We have had more X flares in the last week than probably the previous year. And the strongest one of the current cycle, which I believe means the strongest flare in like 22 years, since this 03 one or something. Our cycle's not quite over either. That flare was just a side glance from the sunspot that gave us the auroras and crazy storms all week that you just heard about, as it's already gone around the far side of the sun. And we weren't even on the connected magnetic field line back part. Our connected back line caught what read on our satellite telemetry as an X 8.78 flare. But clearly, the actual flare itself was vastly more powerful. Once that sunspot was out of the way of Earth, maybe pointed at Saturn or Jupiter with much stronger magnetic fields, it fired off. So there's going to come a point where the degradation of the Earth's magnetic field as a holistic shield against radiation due to polar wander, if nothing changes, the curve ends between 2030 and 2040. We could calculate the orbits of the planets, the position of everything in the solar system at that time, during that time period, and figure on the times when we are in, say, direct conjunction with Saturn or Jupiter and the sun, or alignment or whatever. If the sun is on a solar max at that time, I don't know yet, I haven't done any math. A super flare aimed at all the planets in a row or something, or just, the point at which during that decade, our planet will be somewhere directly in line with a much larger magnetic fielded planet. And if the sun blows one off and our field is at zero, that's the end of technology as we know it, back to about the Bronze Age, Iron Age, for a while. I believe the reason that they tell people this idiot bullshit and get them talking about nonsense that's wrong is that it keeps them away from contemplating the actual reality and revolting, or just becoming ungovernable because what consequences are there if we know the date and time of the end of the world? When the field is weak and the radiation is strong, behavior changes in people too. I noticed this over the past week. And I think when the man Jesus said, "The meek shall inherit the earth," what that involves is the people who don't venture out and get rowdy during that time will be left standing when everyone else has annihilated each other or gotten lethal doses of radiation being outside. So whoever hunkers down survives. That's what that means. They don't want people knowing that it's really happening the way it is for reasons like that. That the field is simply weakening. There's going to come a point where it's either going to bounce back or it's going to continue to meet until the poles touch. And then there's going to be a whole bunch of poles, a whole bunch of aurora points all over the planet, a whole bunch of extra places for radiation to just pour in. And so a few places here and there that may be protected, but it may not even be a stable pattern. They could wander constantly. Now, I used to get a lot of notification flag things on videos. I would just be showing things. I'm not even trying to point out anything in particular of anything conspiratorial. If a video includes a large shot of the sky and there happens to be any kind of cloud in it, I get some little thing at the bottom underneath the video talking about chemtrails is fake. But cloud seeding is real. It is well documented. But I don't think that at the altitudes that they are spraying this crap, that silver iodide or any of the other chemicals like that are going to do what we saw. And if they did, we need to figure out for what purpose. What I've been thinking about the last several days has been alternate scenarios that seem completely absurd that might somehow just turn out to be true. If the circumstances were made perfect for the extinction of all human life, possibly all life in general, that would make this a vast mining opportunity of a planet. If some extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional delegation had arrived here and was taking our resources and handing us something that's supposed to resemble something of value, if the place is being prepared to be colonized. If the place is being prepared to be harvested. Alternate possibilities include simulation argument being true, or real cataclysm that nothing can be done about. It's like the people with mysterious syndrome in Europe that causes them to feel despondent, hopeless. Nothing matters. The common factor of all those cases is having made an enormous mistake and having existential regret. So, if it comes a point where nothing can be done to stop the end of everything that we've built, and maybe we'd be in a better spot if we hadn't fucked around and done all that other dumb shit. That's what they're trying to avoid, the panic of that. Meanwhile, the people who think they matter have already built their bunkers. If you want to know what you're supposed to think it's going to be like, watch that Fallout show, I guess. But again, the meek shall inherit the earth. If that's true, what that means is that the people who hunker down, stay, hidden, will survive. Warlords fight it out with each other, radiation, etc., and hope that your water supply does not get tainted. So yesterday during the day, the sun had a moderate M flare for about 6 or more hours. A long duration rise in X-ray and ultraviolet radiation. During that time, it belched out an enormous amount of coronal mass, which may be headed our direction by tomorrow. If that pummels us in any significant way, and the sun decides to fire off any serious flare radiation at us, we may see aurora. We'll certainly have outages of services. Best thing to do is to be prepared. The next best thing to do is to not broadcast how prepared you are to anyone. Because the fact is, there's going to be people who are prepared and people who are not prepared. Some of the people who are prepared will also be prepared to do anything it takes to be more prepared, including going after people who are prepared but less prepared and taking their stuff. That's about it, I think. Keep your eye on the sky, but here's the funny thing. All this stuff that's going on is invisible to the regular human wavelengths. Satellites can see it. Some animals can feel it. You might be prone to headaches. You might find yourself spacing out. You might find yourself being kind of a dick. The most important thing is to remember that the sun is doing some wild shit, trying to kill us all. Check yourself. Stay frosty.